Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to finish up rebuilding this T56 transmission. Alright, so we're going to get started with rebuilding the countershaft extension. So what goes on this guy is 6th gear and 5th gear and the synchronizer assembly that goes between those two guys. So in this row, this is all the used parts that came out of the transmission. And in this row are all the new parts that I bought. So I got new needle bearings for 5th and 6th gear. I got new blocker rings, a whole new synchro with upgraded keys. So these are the billet keys and not the stamped keys like you would find in the stock ones. And of course, the replacement snap rings, since you need to replace those every time. All right, first thing I'm gonna do is just wipe this down with some brake clean real quick. Make sure it's nice and clean. Sweet. All right, so the first thing that's going to go on is the 5th gear needle bearing, which is this guy. So make sure that's all nice and lubed up in the transmission fluid. And again, this is the Dexmerx 3, which is what is required for this transmission. Cool. Once that's on, then we can put 5th gear on. So remember, the cones and the teeth need to be facing towards the synchronizer, which goes between 5th and 6th gear, so this is going to be facing up. Lube this up on the inside just a little bit. And then that's going to go on. Sometimes you got to squeeze these needle bearings together in order to get the gear to slide on. All right, that's on. And next is going to be the new blocker ring. So this is a stage 2 or stage 1 upgrade, I can't remember, but it has the carbon fiber friction material on the inside versus the paper friction material that's on the inside of the stock ones. So make sure we dunk that. And that's going to go on like that. And next is going to be our synchronizer. So this is the brand new one with the billet keys, like I said before. All the teeth are brand new and perfect. So the shift between 5th and 6th is going to be nice and smooth. I'll engage with the new blocker ring and the gear. So this is going to go on. Now this is going to have to be pressed on because it's a press fit. All right, so I'm using my 2.5-inch diameter tube and a block of wood, and that fits perfectly around the perimeter, or not the perimeter, I guess like the circumference of here. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. So here's the old one. So you want to make sure you're pressing on this portion of the synchronizer, and you can kind of see how the tube lines up perfectly on this part right here. This outside ring moves back and forth, so you don't want to press on that, and you don't want to get caught up on this spring. So it has to sit flush down to the bottom. All right, we're going to start pressing, but we have to make sure that these grooves in this blocker ring are lined up with the keys in the bottom of the synchronizer. Very, very important, or you will break things. All right, here we go. I forgot to open my air valve. Be right back. All right, now we're full power. All right. So now I'm checking to make sure that those grooves are lined up with the keys, which they are. And there we go. All right, so what I'm looking at now is this groove because we have to install a snap ring. So you can see that the synchronizer center section is pressed flush with the edge of that groove. So we're going to be good to go. All right, next up is the new snap ring. Got my snap ring pliers. Remember that the sharp pointy end needs to be facing up. Satisfying click. Up next is the spacer, and per the book this is called the 6th drive gear spacer. Drop it everywhere. So the spacer is going to go on. Then our brand new blocker ring, make sure we dunk that in the fluid. So that's going to fit in the keys, the synchronizer. And then next is the needle bearing. So this is the new needle bearing for 6th gear. So that's going to go on. And then 6th gear. Move up just a little bit. Remember, cone in the teeth, face the synchronizer. So it's going to go down like this. Squeeze the needle bearing. Cool. And then the, what is this one called? Thrust washer, 6th gear thrust washer. That's going to go on like that. So it has like this, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, it has like a flat edge and then an open edge with the shoulder in there. So that open edge needs to be facing up. Just like that. And that's fully assembled countershaft extension. So next we're going to move on to the adapter plate here. And I'm going to take out this bearing race, which is the main shaft bearing race, and it should just come out. And underneath it is going to be a shim or some shims, depending on what it needed. So when we put this back together for the first time, we're going to leave that shim out of there because we got to measure the amount of in-play that the main shaft has, and then reinstall the right number of shims in order to establish a
0 to 5 thousandths in play
on that shaft. So we're gonna do that in a minute, but I'm gonna take this opportunity to swap out this input shaft seal. So let me do that real quick. Got the new seal here, and let's see. It looks like it presses out this way. So let me flip this upside down and get some tools. All right, I'm just using a little punch and a hammer to tap this out. Doesn't take a whole lot. It's out. Just make sure you don't score up the sealing surface here. All right. So that guy is out. And this guy is going in. I'm going to lube it up a little bit with some transmission fluid. All right, new seal is in. So like I said before, I'm just gonna put the bearing race back in without any shims because we got to see, or we have to measure the shaft in play before we can put shims in there. In order to do that, we gotta basically assemble this thing. So let's do that next. All right, since I don't have a table that has a hole in it, I need to use these blocks and the bell housing as a spacer because we'll set the adapter plate on here because we have to install the input shaft to get this measurement. So here's the input shaft. So it's going to fit through that brand new seal. You know, I should lube that up. Make sure I don't tear that brand new seal. So the input shaft is going to go in. Okay. And now the main shaft is going to sit inside of the input shaft. All right, so I have the main shaft here, which we put together in the last episode. So that sits right inside of the input shaft. See, the main shaft, the input shaft aren't actually connected. Okay, everything is spinning freely. All my gears spinning free like they should, which is good. All right, next we need to install the countershaft. All right, here's the countershaft, and I did not replace any of these taper bearings because they were fine. And in the instructions, it actually says, hey, if the bearings are good, don't replace them. So I didn't. So there is a spacer underneath this bearing race, but since I didn't change anything here, we don't have to worry about measuring for that one. All right, so this is the tricky part. We need to get the countershaft in here. So you kind of have to lift the main shaft up and kind of let the gears thread together. There we go. Now everything's threading together nice. And then we got to put the mid case on. So the mid case has the race for this bearing here. So once we put that on, it's going to constrain the main shaft here, and then we can measure how much end play is in the main shaft and put our spacer in there in order to get that in spec. So on goes the main case, or the mid case. And I don't know if I'm tall enough to do this. Okay, just going slow. Make sure that the bearings line up in their races. Sweet. And there we go. All right, so now we got to get a couple bolts in here so we can attach the mid case to the adapter plate to make sure that our end play measurement is good. So let me see if I can do this by feel. I'm just going to get these started so that I can actually flip this thing over. Oh, hey. We got parts? Nice. Cool. We got parts for another project. Always stuff coming in. All right, I kind of scooted this over to the edge of the table so I could get this extension up there. This is the part where transmission falls on my head. All right, now that I got those bolts tightened up, I can kind of lift the mid plate off of the belt housing. Yeah. And set it down. So I can get the rest of the bolts in there torqued down so we get an accurate measurement. All right, so I have the mid case attached to the adapter plate and my dial indicator set up here so we can measure the end play on the main shaft. So let me bring in real close so we can see what we're looking at. All right, I got a little preload on the measurement here, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this guy set to 0. All right, and now what I'm gonna do is just lift up on the main shaft and see what our end play is. So let me get it back to 0. All right, so that looks like about 21.5 thou. Do it again, 21. Do it again. Yeah, I'd say about 21 thou. All right, so we want between 0 and 5 thou of shaft in play according to the manual. So I have a 22 thou shim here, which should put us, a 20 thou shim here that should put us right at 0 to 1 thou of shaft in play. So now we got to take all this apart and put this shim underneath the bearing race in the adapter plate. All right, got all the bolts out, so I'm gonna lift the mid case off. Set that down. And we can take the main shaft out. Set that down. And the counter shaft can come out. input shaft. This is the counter shaft. And I can pull the bearing race out. Sometimes they can be a little fidgety. If you don't pull them out exactly flush, then they don't want to come out. See that? It's so weird. All right, so here's my 20 thou shim. Just gonna throw it right down in there and then reinstall the bearing race. We should be good to go. All right, so I got the input shaft and the counter shaft on the adapter plate, and next we need to get the shift linkage attached to the main shaft. So these fingers here just integrate into these slots on the synchros. So I'm just gonna line that up, press those on like that, and then it just slides down into the case. So let me rearrange the camera and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so admittedly this is pretty fidgety and it's really a lot easier with two people, but I'm gonna try to do it by myself. So I'm just lifting up the counter shaft, getting it kind of out of the way so that the main shaft can come in here. So main shaft sits in here and the shift linkage goes into that slot right there. So the trick is to try to get all this in there together. And I'm upside down. Okay. All right. Easier than expected. I don't think that's down all the way. There we go. All right, so this is our first and second, third and fourth gear shift lever, but we need to install the reverse and fifth and sixth gear shift lever, which is this guy. So it is just gonna slide in down into that slot. And then we have to make sure that this slot right here integrates with this little shelf right here. Sweet, just like that. And I'll bring you in close so you can see what that looks like. All right, so here's a little bit closer of a look. So this is your synchronizer selector for first and second gear, which is this plate here. This one is third and fourth, which goes down to that synchronizer. This one's gonna go to fifth and sixth on this shaft. And that one in the back here is for reverse, which is on the same shaft. So there's this little ledge right here, and there's little slots in each one of these little selectors. So you have to make sure that all of them are aligned on this little ledge, which goes all the way through. So if you remember back in the first video, the teardown video, we took out these two bolts here, which are alignment dowels. So let me show you where those go. So when this case slides on, these alignment dowels are going to have to go in, and the left one is going to sit into this slot right here. Get focused on that, to allow this shift linkage to move up and down but not side to side. And the one on the right is going to fit into this slot right here to allow this to rotate left and right but not move up and down. So it's very important that when this goes together and you put this mid case on, that all that stuff is aligned. All right, so the next step is to get the mid case over all of this and attach to the adapter plate, but this part is super tricky because we have to deal with the offset lever, which is this guy. And in the back of this guy, there's a spring right there. And what sits in that spring is this little ball bearing. Okay, it sits in there. And where that ends up going is right in here. So all these indentations are where that ball bearing can go. And if you look, it kind of looks like the shift pattern where you have reverse there, So that would be first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and reverse. So whenever you're actually moving the lever, you're taking that check ball and putting it in each one of these slots. And that's what gives you like that firm shift feel. So what you have to do is get this guy situated in there as you're sliding the case down until it slides down onto the shift lever shaft. So let me show you. Don't want to lose that guy. But it'll slide on like this. So this is like one of those things where you got to have 3 hands, but I'm going to try to do it, and I'm going to try to put the camera where you can see. Okay, here's my method. I'm going to go ahead and put the check ball in the neutral position, and then I'm going to take the offset shaft, or offset linkage, whatever you call it, and kind of drop it down, and then just scoop up the ball there and push it into place. And that's what it's supposed to look like. And then you have to hold it there with your thumb while you slide this whole thing down over the main shaft and the shift linkages. So super fun. Let's go do that. Come on, so close. There we go. Okay. All right, got it. All right, so I lifted the case back up because I need to put a bead of RTV down here to seal it up. And what I'm going to use is this Moly JV8 stuff. I used this whenever I was building the Duramax for the C20 build, and I really, really like this stuff, so this is what I'm going to use. Just put like a little 1/8 inch bead all the way around. All right, well, that looks pretty good. Probably way too much, but we will see. All right, you know, let the case back down. All right, next up is going to be installing those little guide pins like I was talking about before. So the one on the left should go right in, because remember that channel just moves straight up and down. But the one on the right limits motion in this direction. So if you try to put it in, it's not going to line up. You actually have to pull up just a little bit on the 5th and 6th shifter lever in order to line up that groove, and then it'll go in smooth. And these get torqued down to 20 foot-pounds. Just going to run it in, and then grab a torque wrench. So I backed these back out because I forgot. We definitely want to Loctite these ones. You do not want these things coming loose. So just a dab. All right, now we'll torque them back down. 20 foot-pounds. All right, I ran a couple bolts in through the bottom to attach the mid case to the adapter plate. So now I'm going to pull that off the bell housing so that I can put the rest of the bolts in and get those torqued down. Come on! Ugh, it's a lot heavier now. Oh, man. Get stuck on those dowels. Come on. There we go. Okay. Spin this around. There we go. All right, so there are 11 bolts that attach the adapter plate to the mid case. So I'm gonna get those ran in, and those are torqued to 26 foot-pounds. Next, we want to reinstall the roll pin. Actually, this is a new roll pin into the offset assembly. So you want to make sure that your shift linkage is aligned. So that hole is aligned in there. Tap that guy in. All right, good to go. All right, so I got the transmission back on the floor. We're going to start installing everything that goes in the tail housing portion. So that's starting with the countershaft extension, which we put together at the beginning of the video. So the only thing that I've done is I grabbed the shift fork and installed it on the synchro. And now we're going to align this bore with this shaft here, and then all of these teeth on this extension have to align with the teeth on the other shaft. So let's just lower this guy in here. You don't know it's down far enough until you can see a groove for a snap ring on top of the shift fork. And I'll bring you in close to show you what that looks like. So you can kind of see it better right there. There's this little groove in the shaft here right above the shift fork where a snap ring is going to go. So let's get that installed real quick. All right, and there you can see snap ring is installed. All right, good morning everybody. It's the next day. It's actually Father's Day today, so happy Father's Day to all you dads out there. And a special happy Father's Day to my dad. Here's a picture of us at Father's Day dinner last night, eating some delicious Mexican food. Just want to say thanks, Dad, for letting me figure stuff out, kind of forging my own path, and giving me all the wisdom and advice and encouragement along the way. So happy Father's Day. All right, back to the transmission build. So we are in the final stages here. We have to assemble the 5th and 6th driven gear and the reverse setup, and that's all we have left to do. So I have all the parts here on the table. Next thing is to put on the new 5th and 6th driven gear onto the main shaft. And you're supposed to use a tool that threads into the main shaft and you can press it on, but I don't have that tool, so I think that I'm going to try to hammer it on gently using a piece of pipe and see if that works. If that doesn't work, maybe fit it up in the press and press it on. All right, let's get started. Move up these splines a little bit. Help it press it on a little bit easier. Small gear down. All right, use the old gear. Piece of pipe and my block of wood. So I'm not using a lot of force at all, but it seems like it's going on pretty easily. All right, so we got the 5th and 6th driven gear, press on all the way, and those two gears are flush right there. So the next thing that's gonna go on is the reverse synchronizer. All right, so we got the brand new reverse synchronizer here, and unlike the other synchronizers, this one's only responsible for shifting into reverse, even though it has two sides. So on one of the sides, we're gonna put this retainer plate, and that's gonna keep the keys from trying to fall out the unused side, since there's no blocker ring on this side. So that's just gonna get pressed in there, and then these three little tabs are going to keep those three keys in place. And this will press against the 5th and 6th driven gear, so this retainer won't be able to go anywhere. So this is going to go down, and then we need to install our shift fork, and the raised portion of the shift fork is going to be facing up. So we got to put that on, and this is going to install as an assembly. Like I said, retainer down. I'm going to slide this on the main shaft, line it up with the shift rail. Kind of have to wiggle everything around. There we go. And you know you're down far enough whenever you can see a groove here for a snap ring. And also there's another groove in here for a C-clip. So I'm gonna grab my new C-clip and just make sure. Well, it looks like I need to go down just a little bit more. All right, there we go. Just checking to make sure I got clearance all the way around, which I do. So now we'll install that C-clip and install the snap ring. I need to grab my pliers. All right, remember with these snap rings, the pointy end facing up. All right, that C-clip is installed. Now we're gonna install our snap ring. There we go. And snap ring is installed. All right, now that our reverse synchronizer assembly is installed, we can start with the reverse stack up. So first thing is gonna be this plastic spacer or thrust washer. And then after that is gonna be the reverse blocker ring. I'm gonna make sure that the slots match up with the keys in the synchro. Then after that is going to be this wave washer. And you wanna make sure that the concave side of it is facing down towards the blocker ring. Cool, after that is gonna be the cage bearing, cage needle bearing for the reverse gear. Then it's gonna be the reverse gear. Remember the cone and the teeth facing towards the synchronizer. Sweet. After that is going to be a thrust washer. Just a flat thrust washer. And then everything should be lined up on a groove for a snap ring. So remember with these snap rings, the pointy end needs to face up. Let's get this guy on here. Sweet. After that is a metal spacer. Sit on top of that snap ring. And then a roller bearing. Then after that is going to be another spacer. And again, you should be lined up on a groove for a snap ring. Pointy side up. Sweet. After that is another smaller snap ring. Pointy side up. And it's going to fit into that slot. And then after that is the speedometer gear. Oh, here. Little speedometer gear guy. So that'll go on. And it's going to need to get pressed on. So what I'm going to do is use the old 5th and 6th gear. Piece of tube, wooden block. And get this guy popped into place. Make sure it's seated on that C-clip, which it is. Next up, another C-clip. Pointy side up. Make sure that's fitting in the groove, which it is. Sweet. Then after that is a little rubber, what is this thing called? Rubber something, sealing ring. Yeah, a little rubber sealing ring. It has a kind of a tapered edge on it, a flat edge and a tapered edge, and the tapered edge goes up. All right, so the next step is putting the tail housing on, but before I do that, got to run a bead of RTV around this sealing surface. So I got the sealing surfaces cleaned up, and again, I'm using the Moly JV8 stuff. I'm doing my best just to run an 1/8 inch bead around this. But I've never been good at this, so it's gonna be bad. Yep. That's probably way too much. Alrighty, here we go. Get everything lined up here. Keep touching the RTV. There we go. All right. Alrighty. All looks good. I'm gonna throw some fasteners in this guy. "26 foot-pounds. All right. So the last thing we have to do is to install the rear offset lever. So it just fits on to the shaft like that. And then we have our brand new roll pin, which we're gonna drive into that guy. All right. And it's in there, and I upgraded to a brass shift bushing versus the plastic shift bushing that's in there. Well, there you have it, guys. A completely assembled T56 6-speed transmission. So I want to run it through the gears real quick. That's why I put the shifter on it. And I have the GoPro on the output shaft so we can see to make sure that, that everything works like it should. So in neutral, right, our input and output shaft should not be connected. So I should be able to spin the input shaft, and you can see output shaft isn't spinning. All right, so we'll go to first gear. And now we can see the output shaft is spinning slowly. Shift down into second. Spinning a little quicker. We'll shift up into third. A little quicker. Fourth. So now the input shaft and output shaft are directly coupled to each other because in a T56, fourth gear is a 1-to-1 ratio. So you can see that. Then we'll go up into fifth gear. Output shaft spinning pretty quick now. And then sixth gear, which on this transmission I think is double overdrive. So for every 1 revolution of the input shaft, the output shaft is spinning twice. Which is why these cars get such good gas mileage. Double overdrive gear. All right, and now for reverse. So I gotta pull really hard. Here we go, now we're in reverse, so you should see the output shaft spinning the opposite direction, which it is. So, couldn't ask for a better rebuild. All the gears sound really good. There's no weird sounds. It's very smooth going in and out of gear. So super happy with the rebuild. And again, this was my first transmission that I've ever rebuilt. Just following the steps in the rebuild manual, and it wasn't that bad. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode and for the build series on this T56 transmission. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.